Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Antidote. So today I was joined by Ritson. Chris actually works for himself. Chris has spent years and years building SDR teams, trying to figure out the complexity of the outbound motion. And we spoke a lot about this today of the discussion around, is outbound dead or not? How do you fix it? What are the things that people are commonly doing wrong? How do you keep an SDR team motivated, and this concept of teamship, which really stemmed from Chris's fascinating behind Clive Woodward, who was the Rugby World Cup winning England coach. We also spoke about the trials and tribulations and how hard it is to be a parent and build a business and sort of keep yourself in a good place, and things that Chris has found helpful. So this one was super fascinating. Looking forward to you listening to this one. Chris, man, nice to see you. Welcome to The Antidote. What's been keeping you busy?
Alex, yeah, really happy to be here. What has been keeping me busy? Well, three main things. So family, I've got a young son. Family always comes first for me, but we've got a young son. He's 18 months, terrible sleeper.
Okay.
So we've been navigating that over the last year and a half. Still a terrible sleeper. I've got another kid on the way, so I'm preparing for more rough nights, basically, in 6 weeks' time. Other thing is trying to build two businesses at the same time. One is my primary business, and then I have a side hustle as well that I run with a friend. So that keeps me pretty busy, 9 to 5, I guess. And then the other thing really is I'm obsessed with self-development. So I've been doing a lot of work on myself recently as well, doing a lot of introspection on how I manage my emotions, how I deal with certain situations, and just overall trying to be a better person than I think I've historically been. So yeah, it's that kind of sums me up in terms of what I'm up to, what's keeping my mind busy.
Well, mate, to say you've got your hands full is probably the biggest understatement ever. But congrats on the second one coming along. 2 under 2, is that right?
2 under 2, yeah, terrifying but exciting at the same time.
I think having 2 is great. And when my second arrived, you feel like you're actually building a proper family. Whereas with one, it was just pass the ball. You look after.
Oh yeah,
mate, that's awesome. Well, I'd love to tap into the self-development bit a bit later, but let's kick off with the first bit.
Yeah, sure.
So I always like to ask. Everyone's got a big challenge they're trying to solve, right? We call this the poison. What we want to do is give listeners an antidote. What's the big thing that you're on a mission to solve?
Big thing that I'm on a mission to solve, I guess, in terms of what my business is all about, and something that I care very, very deeply about, is helping salespeople reach their full potential. I think that I feel like a lot of people get hired still, and into sales roles, and they're not coached, they're not trained, or they are, and it's not very effective. Right? Their managers have never been teachers or coaches before, as an example. So how can we expect them to teach and coach people to a high performance level if the manager or the coach in the first place has never actually led a team or worked with people or coached them or enabled them in any sort of professional capacity? So, and that also goes to the managers as well, right? That's also a problem for them that I feel very passionately about. So I think that's that's my main mission really, is to help especially junior salespeople reach their full potential if sales is something that they actually really want. And that's the mission that I would go on with people to find that out.
Okay, interesting. Now you're very well known for helping a specific function, which is more like the SDR function, right? Helping people go outbound.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you what I see. If you look on LinkedIn, you go to an event, everyone's saying cold, outbound is broken and SDRs don't work anymore. What we see at Reach Desk is at least half of our revenue comes from that function. Partly because that's who we sold to. But why do you think people are saying this? Is it true? And If it's not, what should people be thinking about to like rectify this?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think historically, if I look at sales, I look at outbound specifically, and you probably got this at Reach Desk, right? If you look at your data when you actually initially speak to someone and then they close, from an outbound perspective, there's longer sales cycles typically than there are from an inbound perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right? But why, and this sounds very simple, but why is that? It's because that person that you're speaking to has never come across you, so at all. So their level of trust needs to be built over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And outbound and historic outbound, and a lot of outbound going on right here, right now, is getting on the phone, dropping an email, and trying to go from the top of that email to the bottom of it, selling someone on why they should move forwards pretty much now. And that's actually quite a rare occurrence, right? There's no educational process in there. There's no drip feeding someone, or nurturing them over a long period of time. It's either now or never. And that binary motion, I think, is something that actually most sales development functions are now starting to suffer a lot from running, because my view is actually a huge amount of the people that we speak to, especially in an innovative tech environment or SaaS environment where you're building innovative technology, most people you're speaking to, they haven't ever heard of anything that you're doing, right? So why would you buy something you've never heard of? You've never even had a thought about it. So why would it ever be on your budget lines? It wouldn't. So you're actually like a modern day SDR, a modern day person that's going outbound. The first thing that I think they need to be taught and to understand is there's three answers that you're going to get on any of the channels that you are prospecting people on. You're going to get no, fine. You're always going to get some no's. And people are just like, I signed a 5-year contract with someone else, sort it off, sort of thing, right? You're going to get yeses, right? People who you just got lucky with in the market right here, right now. And then actually probably about 35% of the people you speak to, they're going to be your not right nows. And they're going to be your people who you should be stacking up for the future, who will either come in inbound to you and say, hey, you've done a really good job of educating me over this period of time from now to 3 months, if that was the time frame. I'm now ready to have this conversation. Or when it comes to the 3 months time and you've done a good job again of nurturing them and educating them, that's when they turn around and say, yeah, do you know what? I'm in the market now. I'm going to take this conversation. But we're so determined as salespeople to get a yes or a no and live in this binary world, because that's what our dashboards say we have to sort of live by. It is actually, we are commissioned only on yeses right now within this month, that we force our lists and our market to either give us a yes or a no. And actually most of the people in the market, or not most, but a good portion, 1 in 3 of the people that we're speaking to on average, they're just a not right now because they don't know enough about what you do and how you do it and how that can help them with a specific problem that they might be facing today. But that problem is probably going to build up over a long period of time. And that's where I think a lot of the coaching element comes in, right? And a lot of like the leadership piece is so important, because if we're coaching reps to just live in a binary world, we're not maximizing the potential that we can get out of them, because they're not maximizing the lists because they're treating them the wrong way in the first place. So that's like one of the biggest problems I see, and it's kind of epidemic, right? Because most sales teams, most SDR teams are targeted on this, monthly quotas, weekly activity quotas or meetings quotas. And you stand there at the end of the week saying, how many meetings you booked? Oh, I've got 5. Okay. How many people said no? 25. Right. My question always used to be with the team is that how of those 25, how many are no's? How many are not right nows? And I used to teach them relentlessly. I know they could find the yeses for me. That was the easy bit. The harder bit was getting them to decide and figure out, with context, who was the no's and who were the not right nows. Because when they were able to do that, they used to just stack them up for the future. And they would get to the harder months like August and December, in the SDR world, which are typically these sort of down dead months. And they would have so many conversations that they'd started in April, May, June, July. That August was fine, or September, October, November, that December was completely fine, right? And because the people that they were then speaking to in December, they started that conversation 3-4 months ago when that person, might have had a bit of a twinge of a problem, but it wasn't big enough for them to be top of their priority list yet, and really explore. And that's one of the biggest training gaps I see in SDR teams, but also in AE teams when they're going outbound as well. And fundamentally, I totally stole this from when I was in AE, when I used to speak to people and they'd be close lost. And my job in my mind was to figure out, is this a close lost forever, or is this a close lost for not right now? Because if you're a deal for 6 months' time, then that's just money for me in 6 months' time towards my quota. Like, that's a great win for me in 6 months. My job is just to make sure you remember me and you still like me when it gets to 6 months' time. So I took that philosophy and applied it to SDRs, and then just trained them relentlessly on you're not in a binary world, right? And your job is very much like running a business. It's, you're going to be obsessed with these short-term goals and controlling today, but how are you making sure what you're doing today is looking after the long-term and longevity of your individual one-person SDR business? And only by teaching them that kind of gave them the foresight to think, oh, maybe I don't need to live in this consistently hyper emotional world of it's either yes or no. It's either glory or pain. There's some middle ground there. And being a Geordie myself, for like black and white, I struggle with that historically as a concept. But teaching people there is that middle ground in sales was honestly one of the secret sources that helped build successful SDR teams. And I use a lot of it in my coaching programs now. But it's also one of the differences I see that people do. People say, "Oh, they just naturally get it." And you dig into what are you doing? And there's two things I look for. I'm like, what are you doing now that's booking you more meetings today? But also, one thing I've always found is most of that with successful people is when you dig into it. I say, when did you start that conversation with Reach Desk? And they're like, 4 months ago. Like, okay, what did you do in between now and 4 months? And they're like, well, I spoke to Alex, he never messaged me back, but I spoke to him every maybe 3 or 4 weeks. Every single message I sent to him was bang on the problem we originally spoke about. Then I dropped him, a webinar invite because the webinar was about that problem. And that was why Alex then decided to turn up to the meeting 4 months later, because I was just consistently relevant with him. I kept, Alex told me he had a bad back, so I kept just mentioning his bad back and then giving him some value on the back of the bad back, sort of philosophy. So that was like, that's one of the biggest problems. I feel like there's such a wastage, right, in every single SDR's day to day. When you do 100 calls, maybe get 3 pickups, one's a yes, one's a no, one's a not right now. Most SDRs would say to you at the end of the day, I got 1 yes and 2 no's. The best ones will say, I got 2 yeses, one's for tomorrow, one's for 3 months' time, and I got 1 no that I'm not going to spend any more time on.
It's so funny you say that, because I was in our office last week and one of our best SDRs said that. He said, I actually had like 3 conversations today. I remember him saying I had 3. One was like a massive no. The other 2 were like not right now. So I was like, that sounds like a no to me, to be honest with you. But actually, it sounds like he's right. He's thinking about how do I get it for the future. Interesting. So, like, rejection is the thing that I've seen is the thing that pertains to out sales, whether you're an SDR, an AE, even a leader. Rejection is the really hard bit. And SDRs specifically, they get the most, I think. How do you help SDRs specifically overcome that? Is that something that you try and assist with?
Yeah, I think it's the leader's job to do that, right? So I'm quite a process and frameworks driven person. And I used to like to give people some of the frameworks that I come up with. One of those frameworks was actually specifically for this. And it wasn't just about like them dealing with the rejection. It was how they were able to process it and enjoy that process. Right. And I know that sounds ridiculous. You can't reject it. How can you enjoy that process? Right. But this kind of comes back to this philosophy for me of like high performance. And how can you achieve high performance? Well, in order to achieve high performance, you're probably going to lose a lot of games. You're probably going to win quite a few games as well. But you can't just enjoy the winning and just, ignore the losing piece. So there's a couple, like what I used to do with every single one of my SDRs back in the day was 3-step process. So firstly, I got them to actually like write out what their vision for themselves was in 10 years time. I know that sounds ridiculous. It's like, oh, well, the average SDR is only in seat for 14, 15 months. But for me, it was, I want you to understand why this 14, 15 months, 18 months, 2 years, whatever they're going to be in seat for, is actually going to help you achieve your vision in 10 years time. Very much like a founder would think about, okay, where are you taking Reach Desk in 10 years time? Visualize that. What does that look like? For me, at an individual level with the team, it was doing the same thing. And it gave me a couple of things. It gave me an idea of where they wanted to go, but most importantly, it gave them a very clear idea of why what they were doing today was really, really important for, at a micro level, to make better decisions to affect this bigger, grander vision that they had further down the chain. We worked really hard on that vision with them. The second part of it was then, once you've got a vision where you want to go, you need to commit to that, because ultimately that's what's going to keep you in the game. If you feel like this SDR job is going to help you move towards your longer term ambition today, when it's hard and you've had 5 rejections, you know that you're one step closer to a yes. But if you can't see this helping you get to where you want to go, you're not going to do it. You're going to quit and you're going to stop, and that compounds over time. And those behaviors compound over time. Those bad decisions compound over time, I would say, all those good decisions at that micro level. And the third part was, okay, like, get obsessed with learning. And because it's all well and good having a vision and then committing to it and working really, really hard, but then if you learn nothing from it, kind of what's the point? So it was this like obsessive learning that I wanted them to also be thinking about with regards to how they did it. And operationally, the way that I instilled that was, you give me your vision when you start, so I know where you're going, but most importantly, you do. Then you commit and you understand, and you apply the hard work. That's where the KPIs piece came in, right, as like a tool to help guide that. And the third part was the learning bit, which operationally, how we operationalized that was, I banned SDRs from doing any activity for 1 hour a week every week. And instead, they looked at their performance from the previous week, and they had to bring in their analysis of their performance into one-to-ones and say, here's where I went wrong, here's what I did well, here's why, and most importantly, on the back of that, here's what I'm trying in A/B testing this week. Because everyone bangs on about A/B testing and being data driven, but salespeople, they don't know that unless you create an environment that almost forces them to learn the skill and understand the importance of it in relation to their kind of bigger and greater goals and objectives. So that's how I got them to actually enjoy the rejection piece a little bit more, and enjoy the process and the ride. And sometimes, you know what, we used to just sit at the end of the week and laugh about some of the conversations, right? And just say, look, like, here's what happened. And honestly, I don't know what happened. And I used to be super vulnerable with them about some of the mistakes I made and the mess ups that I had, because I used to get on the phones and emails and all that sort of stuff loads as well. And we just laugh about it, and we'd walk it through, and it was right. Well, that week's done. Like, we'll move on, and we'll get going again.
Love it. I love it. Love just laughing. I don't think we spend enough time laughing at the mistakes or the cock ups.
No, especially not in this environment.
More, right?
Yeah. Especially not in this environment. We're all so panicked about number constantly.
Yeah, that's so true.
We forget some of the little things that make the world go round that little bit better for salespeople, right?
Okay. Well, on that note, that's probably a perfect transition. I'm not going to ask you to list all the mistakes you've made, Chris, but
That'll be a really, really long
yeah,
list.
let's go through all of them. You've like so you've run successful SDR teams. You've been part of some incredible companies. You're now running your own business. Like, what have you had to go through to get to where you are today?
Yeah, I think that leads back to my the first question and the third point. I I failed loads. I've messed up loads. I've received a lot of pretty damning feedback over the years, and I would say that I started my when I started my career, I came from an environment where like I came from a sport environment where I'd typically done very well, and whatever I'd picked up or whatever I tried my hand at, I'd often just been able to do it at a reasonably high level quite quickly. I think with that came in my younger years came a level of arrogance, to be honest with you, and I think as soon as I brought that into maybe sales and then sales leadership, I think I again like my career trajectory went quite steeply, quite high, quite quickly, and I think I also lacked a lot of self awareness, especially in my younger years, and I let that ego side of me get the better of me relatively consistently. I'd say from when I was 10 to 25, for sure. But it's only when I wasn't in a job that I was like, Chris, how has it got to this point? And you sit down and you think, you ask yourself these really hard questions about how has it got to this point? And actually, I could have sat there, and I absolutely did, for about 6 weeks saying, oh, my boss was this or that or whatever. And actually, none of it was about my boss. It was all about me. But it took me that period of introspection, right, to think about it and process it and actually look in the mirror and kind of drink my own Kool-Aid and admit where I done things incorrectly and hadn't behaved in the right way or hadn't processed something emotionally right and then dealt with it in a really, really bad way. At the time, or my version of a really bad way. Maybe I'm holding myself too higher standards again, but that was a big moments for me, and I've continued to do that. I'd say over the next sort of 4, 5, 6, 7 years, where actually I put checkpoints in where I will reflect, and I actually reflect every day now, which sounds extreme, but at the end of each day, I'll have a look and think about, just for 5 minutes, how did the day go? How were the conversations that I had? If I'm in SDR mode, I'm like, how many conversations did I have? How did they go? Where could I have done better? Why did I snap at my mum when we were on the phone there? And I'm starting to force myself to become more self-aware of how I'm handling all of these micro things on a day-to-day basis, and that's taken me many years to get to that point. But I think it starts with just writing something down and taking responsibility for some of the things that you've done.
Oh man, I love that. I got into a similar habit only 3 months ago. I have an app on my phone now that prompts me. And it's
Nice.
almost like a journaling app, and
Yeah.
it's obviously it's cathartic, but it gives you that 5-10 minutes just to reflect on a daily basis. You say I can't remember if you said it was extreme or not, but I'm trying to do it twice a day now because it's a really wonderful thing to do and to give yourself, and it doesn't take a lot of time either. Nice, man. Well, look, you mentioned self-development as well. Obviously, that's part of it. What else are you doing to keep yourself in a good state of both body and mind? And what are you doing to that you think others might want to think about doing to help them get through the hard times of being a leader or building a business?
Yeah. How can you get through the hard times? I think I'm a real big believer in this, but it's my dad, I didn't admit this to my dad until maybe a year ago, but when I was younger, he used to say, Chris, life is a pyramid. There's 3 parts to it. Start with what you enjoy, then when you find what you enjoy, you'll work harder. When you work harder, you'll go and achieve the extrinsic things that you're constantly chasing. And when I started my sales career, I took the job because it paid more than my uni housemates, and I was like, yeah, like, I'm competitive. I want to earn more money than you guys. That immediately shows I've obviously been more successful in life so far. And then I look back at that now, I'm like, that was so naive, but thank God I took it, because it opened all this new world of sales to me. Everything happens for a reason, sort of thing. But the point was, I actually took my dad's pyramid and applied, and every single time I'd had a different job, I thought about that job in terms of what did I actually really truly enjoy about it, and what did I not. And the next job that I went into, I deliberately tried to delete the things I didn't enjoy or remove them from that opportunity and keep the things I loved. And sometimes that meant that I took pay cuts, right? And sometimes that meant that I took at face value a step down. So my first sales role, I was full cycle. Then I went into an SDR role, right? But it was this commitment to figuring out in my 20s what I really enjoyed that led me to the SDR world, where, I made a decision 6-7 years ago that I used to run AE teams originally. And it sort of was back in the day, but I got a taster of running an SDR team and just really enjoyed it. So when they wouldn't let me run it internally because they wanted to just outsource SDR, I was like, well, actually, I want to go and pursue that. And I made the decision essentially on, based on the fact that I enjoyed it. And it paid less. And, people will say, yeah, but SDR is more stressful in some ways. You have all these people challenges and blah, blah. I'm like, you have people opportunities, right? You have the chance to show someone who has no idea how much sales can change their life, just how impactful it can be for them and their family moving, into the future. And that's what I care about. That's where I get my real internal, selfish kicks, so to speak, is I enjoy seeing that and getting those messages 5 years down the chain where it's like, Chris, hey, I'm so glad you taught me outbound, man, because we just went full outbound as an AE team, and I'm the only one on the team that can do it.
I love hearing that, man.
I told you.
Cool.
I told you.
Yeah.
Cool. At the time, they were hating me sometimes, where I was just like, the job here as the leader is I'm not, I'm not your friend. I'm here to get the best out of you possible. And sometimes you're going to not like some of the things that I have to say. But I promise you, if we work on them together, always together, then we'll get there in the end. And they're the sort of moments that I take a huge amount from in terms of the journey, and it keeps me in the game because I'm passionate about it, and because I'm passionate and I enjoy it, when it's really crap, and some days it is, right? Running a business, there's some days where you're like, what just happened? Right? And then you wake up the next day and you're like, okay, today's probably going to be better than yesterday. Yeah. And then sometimes it's not, it's worse.
Oh yeah, sometimes it's way worse. I thought it was bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, well, tomorrow, or this afternoon or whatever. And for me, it always just goes back to this bigger vision piece and this bigger mission piece that I always used to try and draw out of my SDRs. And I was always really upfront with them as well about this, where I would say, okay, if your vision, and here's a short story. One of my best ever SDRs, called Cleo, she left. She ended up leaving. But one day she turned around to me and said, Chris, I want to be a doctor. And I said, okay, well, your vision's changed, right? You originally wanted to be a sales director, right? And we're working towards getting to AE, but you want to be a doctor now. So take the weekend, come back to me and tell me how's this SDR role going to help you become a doctor. I knew what the answer was. It wasn't, right? But I wanted her to work that out, and I wanted her to fully own it. So she took the weekend, went, spoke to her parents, her sisters, came back and said, look, Chris, I feel really bad. I'm going to let the team down. And I said, look, Cleo, well, the biggest thing that you'll let the team down on is by letting yourself down first, because you're not doing something you love and you see in your future. So you're going to stop working as hard as you set yourself as the standards in the first place, which means, your confidence will drop because you won't perform as well, and it'll become a spiral. So go, go and apply to be to medical school. And I think she's like in her final year now or something like that. And she messages me sometimes and says, "Chris, you know what? It's a dream working as an SDR because being a junior doctor is an absolute nightmare." Right? But I love it, and that's and I want to be a consultant in 10, 15 years time. And you got me to think about this vision piece for where I really want to be, what the impact I want to have, and what I'm going to enjoy. And I was like, and even when you're on your 6th night shift in a row, what do you think? And she's like, well, I think I need to stay in the game, because that's where I want to go in the long term with this. And I actually do enjoy it, even though I'm exhausted and I'm 7 coffees in at 4 a.m. And my circadian rhythm's never going to be the same. Right. But the point is, like, I'm like, okay, they're serious sacrifices, but you're staying in the game for the vision, and that's it.
Love that, man. That's a very powerful story. Absolutely love that. All right, dude. Well, look, we're pretty much up for time, so I'm going to go through the quick fires real quick.
Yeah.
I was asked this: if you could have a drink with anyone in the world who you perhaps admire, who would it be?
There's so many people, but Clive Woodward.
Okay,
would be mine.
Oh, I could have a drink with Clive.
So, yeah, Clive Woodward. So, reason why is I'm obsessed with leadership. So I became a leader when I was about 24, completely unqualified and had no idea what I was doing. But I read quite a lot of Clive Woodward's work, because he does a lot of, he has a business in learning and development, or learning an L&D business. And I was obsessed with England rugby, and I just was reading about some of the work that he was doing outside of rugby, and how he built a life outside of rugby. And it allowed me to stumble across what he built for the England rugby team before they won the World Cup in 2003. And he built this concept of teamship, that took, that was, and I thought it was really, really, really interesting, because it was about how can we build a team that has the behaviors that support us becoming number one in the world. And I took that in all of my roles, and rather than building a hard skills playbook saying follow this sequence, I built a teamship playbook first and foremost. I say I built it. The team built it at each one of the businesses that I worked at. And then they followed their own rules because they built it, and there was this ultimate accountability with them, that I didn't have to deal with as many people problems as other SDR leaders, because they were following their own rules that they'd built, not what I'd built. So I totally stole that from Clive, and that's why I'd love to have a drink with him, because from a leadership perspective, taking an amateur sport and players and going and becoming the best team in the world within a 5-year period, you have to have some serious leadership capabilities in order to do that. And that would be my thing. And I'm also, he's a very committed bloke, and that's what I would say. If I have to define myself in one word, it would be like commitment. If whatever I'm doing, I'll give it everything, sometimes too much, and I need to manage myself better. But I think we'd get on because I think we're both a bit intense, basically.
Love it, man. All right. Well, next question would be, what's the dumbest thing that, let's say, SDRs or SDR leaders, maybe the biggest mistake they're making right now, and what should they be doing differently?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I think, at leadership level that I see most companies doing when I'm working with them is they're so and this is quite topical at the moment, but they're so obsessed with teaching the reps the product that they forget to teach the reps who they're speaking to and what the people care about in front of them. And fundamentally, right, you're trying to push people through a cold prospect funnel in terms of outbound, and that starts with start the conversation, trust, deeper relationship, book the meeting, and then onwards. Like, you should be optimizing everything you do as an SDR leader for, yes, starting as many conversations as possible, but then when they're in those convos, how are they building as much trust with that person as humanly possible? And that's where like this whole philosophy around problem enablement comes in. And that's not just at a cold first conversation level. That's also all the stuff we're talking about with regards to nurturing people effectively over long periods of time who just are you're not right nows. It's, if SDRs don't know what the person in front of them cares about, it's very difficult for them to send a message to them that's going to be relevant or in any way compelling. And that's where that's where the messaging bit all starts. It's once you've sorted out having a good list, it's can they message them effectively enough to get their attention and build a tiny little brick of trust, right, in the wall that you need to build in order to get them from cold to customer.
Nice. Oh, I love that. That certainly resonates with me. I think I made that mistake a long, long time ago, where we weren't teaching them the problems or what personas care about. And yeah, you can make it very product related. So I've seen it done before. I think it's spot on. Is there a particular business that you're watching right now that could be like a future game changer that you think, wow, this one really excites me?
So I've been dabbling, obviously, in angel investment. Got absolutely no idea what I'm doing, obviously, but I'm determined to try and learn it a little bit more. So I should I'd probably say one of those, but then I wouldn't want to pick one out and make the others feel bad. So I'm gonna say a company called Hyperbound. You might have come across it, but
Yeah, I know them
they
well.
are. Yeah, I'd say a company called Hyperbound. I think there's quite a lot of there's a lot of I think good movement coming from that company, but also most importantly, not just in terms of their product. I think the people there that are building it are really good eggs as well, and I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Part of this, if I had to invest in a company that was relatively new, sort of a year or two old, sort of thing, I could invest in anyone, I'd probably invest there.
Love that. Yeah, I know Atul over at Hyperbound. For those listening and watching, it's essentially like a cold calling bot. So you cold call it and you practice cold calling and objection handling with
Yeah,
a bot. And it essentially helps you because we don't get as many connects these days. So it allows you to build the reps in advance, which is awesome. Nice, man. Well, Chris,
yeah,
I didn't tell you this one in advance, by the way, but I do also
that's all
I
good.
always finish on the same question, which is if you were to tell people to do one thing to help them break through the noise right now, what would you tell them to be doing?
Spend 30 minutes at the end of every single day prepping your list for tomorrow,
Ah,
right? Because if you have a clear view every morning of who you're going to be focused on, you can focus on the message that you need to deliver as opposed to start, research, look at another account, maybe do a call here. And that's like the world most SDRs live in. It's this very chaotic sort of ad hoc world. Whereas actually again, one of the things I used to do with my teams was 30 to 60 minutes, depending on how long you needed, phones down, activity away, you've done enough for the day. How are you setting tomorrow up for success? And because I'm a big subscriber to that, where I'm like, if planning's a waste of time without execution, but your planning and your preparation is designed to help the chances of you winning increase. So spend some time doing it, majority of your time executing. But if you're just executing blindly, then you're probably executing on the wrong things a lot of the time as well. So yeah, that would be what I would recommend everyone does.
sage advice. I try and give the same advice to myself, so I'm glad you said that. Mate, well, look, we're
It's
up for
hard.
time.
It's hard.
It is hard. It is hard. I suspect you and I could talk for hours and hours, but sadly we do have to
I
end
think
it
so.
there.
Yeah.
But mate, thank you so much for giving up your time and your wisdom. For people listening and watching, how can they find you?
Just go to my website, so chrisritson.xyz, or ping me on LinkedIn. Either one of those two things is or places, you'll be able to get in contact with me.
Everyone needs to follow Chris on LinkedIn. The content is gold. I love what you're putting out there, man. I love what you're doing. Man. Thank you for joining us. This has been another episode of The Antidote.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate.